Hello.
Hello. What a landing that was.
Woo! Welcome to Question Block. Secret Loft's live Instagram live talk show that's virtual.
Yeah, I think I just saw a shooting star go by in the background. It's amazing.
Oh no, it's just me.
Yeah, so this week's theme is space. I'm Captain Wires, your astronaut of, I don't know, the USS Secret Loft.
The
USSSS You Oh, you're picking a cosmic background for us.
I was. I don't know what happened there.
All right.
But
I'll
it's
let you
okay.
keep working on that. So,
it's all good.
For those of you listening to this in podcast form, we're going to talk all about space tonight. We're going to talk about astronomers and the space race.
Yes.
We're going to be joined by a special guest later who will also tell us about something related to space.
Yeah.
It should be great.
What makes this a special, because there's so many podcasts out there, what makes ours special? Why should people keep listening?
Well, we're the most knowledgeable, clearly, about about space.
Obvio. That's a given.
People listening to the podcast, I think, can tell that we're wearing costumes, and I'm currently wearing a spacesuit, and you're wearing
a spacesuit.
Really a snowsuit.
It's a spacesuit. It's cold on my planet, okay?
Yeah, any clothing can be a spacesuit if it's a habitable planet.
If you're in space.
If you're
if you ready to play.
Yeah. So that's really what distinguishes us, I think.
Also, we pick the topic totally random. We have a discussion every week, and we're like, "What do you want to do?" And then we do it, and we really cram. So, yeah, we really cram for these all week and get the best information and filter it through our brain spheres.
Okay.
And then we do a rave based on the theme, which I think makes it super unique as well.
Well, there you go. It's a real package deal. So if you listen to any of this podcast, now you have to also go look up the rave on Twitch or YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
Well, let's get into it.
Okay. So, space.
What is it?
Space. What is space? People have known about space since the dawn of time.
We're going to start, I suppose, with the history, right?
Yes. I'm going to start with the history of just astronomy.
Because the ancient civilizations, astronomy was very important. And they had calendars based on, the phases of the moon and on the sun. And they were, had pretty good guesses and estimates long before Europeans about, a heliocentric universe and
what does that
the Earth
mean?
was a planet and all that stuff. That the sun is the center of our solar system and the Earth is orbiting around it.
Word.
They guessed that, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the Mayans were pretty on point, even though their calendar stopped in 2013 or 2012 or whatever.
Yeah, 2012.
Whatever. They're not gonna know. Their calendar stopped, so they're not gonna know I messed it up. They had it real spot on in 400 Surya, which actually means sun in Hindu, I believe. Surya Siddha had the average length of a year pretty darn good, and everyone in the Middle East and India, they pretty much had their calendar down. They knew that things were heliocentric. They were we cool with this. We're just gonna go build the Taj Mahal and some mosaics and whatnot, and just be cool. And then in two, yeah.
How are they observing this stuff? They would just look at the stars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they would look at the star. I mean, it just wasn't a big thing. They were because they didn't try and confuse and intermingle philosophy and religion with it. They would just saw what they saw, and then they were yeah, that's what's going on. Okay, cool. Let's go be epic now. In Greece, there is this dude named Aristarchus of Samos, or I guess in
Aristarchus.
I guess
Nice.
in Samos. I guess it was in Samos and not Greece because he was of Samos. But he came up with a heliocentric model, and then a lot of the Greek philosophers were like, yeah, about that though. We like to be like the center of attention, so it's probably the Earth.
So Aristotle was against it.
Yeah, Aristotle was like, I'm the better one with the AR name.
Made a bunch of shit up.
Yeah. Well, because I love philosophy, but when it comes to science, philosophy and science they're not friends, really.
But they were back then. Natural philosophy was what science was called.
But
right?
science would have progressed so much more if it wasn't for like people like getting
Having
thoughtful
really
about
deeply
it.
held beliefs.
Yeah, because it's like, who cares why? Like, if you have the right answer, then it's right, and like, just shut up, you know? That's what I would say when I cheated on all my math tests. I'd be like, I don't have to show my work. I don't have to tell you how I felt.
So, by the way, the reason that all these ancient civilizations cared a lot about the position of the stars and planets was navigation. So the calendar was like a nice thing to have, and they like did like track because the seasons were important. But it really mattered if you go out on a ship in the ocean and you haven't yet invented the compass, you are totally screwed, right? Once you get out of sight of land.
Yes.
Because like, how do you know where anything is? So being able to navigate by the stars is super important. So they looked at the stars a lot. And seafaring civilizations go back like 20,000, 50,000 years. Humans have been in boats going around.
You're obsessed with seafaring civilization.
Very important.
I love that.
But so right, even, you know, as far back as the Mayans or the Greeks, and even like pre them, like Babylonians or whatever, they noticed that there were stars that kind of looked the same night after night. And then there were other things that looked like stars that moved a lot relative to like their position in the sky. And then there was the sun and the moon, obviously.
Yes. And there was the harmony of the spheres. That was like a popular theory.
What's that?
That the Earth was a sphere, and that like a semicircle, and there were like domes around it. It was like a big planetarium, but like everything was doming. It was like I imagine it like the set on a play with interchanging scenes.
Yeah, like a Truman Show type thing.
Yeah,
The sky is a dome. But it is like, I guess, interesting, I don't know, or just very sad that there's still like people who are like believed in a flat Earth, because like the Greeks figured out that like the Earth wasn't flat by looking at shadows of like a stick versus like the sun. This is like a thing they figured out in like 400 BC or something.
Yeah.
That the Earth was round, and they really liked it because it's a very elegant conception that the Earth is a sphere.
Ain't she pretty? Ain't she cute? Is she cute like that with her contour?
Yeah, they were like, oh, it's like a raindrop. It makes sense. Yeah.
So there was this Greek astronomer and mathematician named Claudius Ptolemy. Mm-hmm. Basically, everyone was named Ptolemy back then. There was Egyptian Ptolemies, but this was a Greek Ptolemy.
There were 2 Ptolemies?
There were like 8 Ptolemies.
Okay.
There were so many Ptolemies.
Ptolemy starts with a P, for those who are listening.
Ptolemy. Ptolemy.
Like pterodactyl.
Pterodactyl and Ptolemy. They lived at the same time on the flat Earth. So this was it was 90 to 168 AD. Ptolemy sets up a model of the solar system, which the sun, the stars, and other planets revolve around the Earth. This is known as the Ptolemaic system, and it remained in place for hundreds of years, though it turned out to be flat wrong.
Hey.
According to NASA, Ptolemy represents the epitome of knowledge of Grecian astronomy. Mm-hmm. So there was, and there were like the Sufi guy known as Azophi to Westerners, who made the first observations of a group of stars outside of the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy.
You're saying that Aristarchus was like 300 years before, and he was actually right.
He was right. He was like a little bit quiet. He was like a quiet boy. So he was like, hey, you guys, like, you know, maybe stuff is different. And people were like, shh.
No one listened to Aristarchus. You got to sell your ideas.
Yes, which we're gonna history repeats.
If you can't give a good PowerPoint presentation, no one's gonna pay attention to you.
Yeah, it's true that. Oh yeah, so there comes this time. like the Renaissance and like the pre-Renaissance, where people are like, those Greeks though, we really like them, and everything that like the good Christian ones said is correct. And anyone who kind of goes against them will be burned and die.
Oh, now you're talking about like the Inquisition.
Well, a little before it did like a tiny bit before the Inquisition, but hints of the Inquisition.
Okay, the Catholics got real strict.
Catholics got strict, but they also really loved a lot of the ancient Greek philosophies that supported the scripture.
Yeah, they just liked the parts that supported like the Bible.
And they got they really like
not the other parts.
Clung on to this, everything revolves around the earth because the earth is God, and that's like a little bit in the Bible. It's like not even really in the Bible, but it's like a little bit. And they were like, yes, the Greeks support this.
I think in the Bible they reference like the inconstant, like unchanging nature of the heavens is like a throwaway line somewhere in the scripture. And that became like, they're like, oh, well that means that like the stars have to be like on a sphere that just rotates. They can't move relative to each other because then they wouldn't be constant. Position.
and God will smite us down.
Well, obviously if you like look at the sky and take careful observations, then like clearly it is changing.
They weren't really doing that so much.
Well, they knew like planets were orbiting, right? And they had all the retrograde cycles and stuff.
They did
astrology,
and they were using the Julius calendar, the Julian calendar, which was Julius Caesar's calendar, named after the month he was killed in, which is July, and his name. That calendar was a geocentric calendar, and it predicted, or it had, the math of it was that a day, they had the length of a day pretty correct, but not quite. And over the years, that little not quiteness added up to kind of a lot of not quiteness. So Easter started to end up in a different month. And this really freaked out the Catholic Church, and they were like, okay.
Wait, so can I go into the details of the specific difference, or do we not care about that?
I mean,
I don't want to bore anyone.
You could just, like, minor specific, interesting specific.
Well, the Romans, like the Julian calendar, did have leap years. Like, they realized that a year was a little less than 365
Right, they had leap
days.
Years, but what didn't they have?
Years, but it's... leap years, you actually don't leap the year like every 200 years, and I think it's every like 800 years you do. It's like much more like subtle over hundreds of years, and it turns out you have to do that because
so they weren't doing that, but also it really came down to the fact that their length of a day was slightly effed up, and that added up. Like, so it was those two main issues.
Yeah, the average year was like 10 minutes short.
Yeah, and then that 10 minutes adds up when you do the math. And by the 16th century, that was beginning to be a problem because Jesus' birthday was moving farther away.
So 1500, what? I guess Caesar was 200? Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, or no, he was like 60, 80.
Whatever,
yeah, so
a long
1600
time
years later, they're like, man, we're really losing some days.
They're like, Easter's getting farther and farther away, and we don't know what to do.
So Easter had moved into February by that point.
Yeah, they're like, it can't be at the same time as Valentine's because we have to sell the hearts and then the eggs, and it's fucking up our Hallmark.
That's so funny. I bet people were like, oh, the stupid like drugstores change the displays like immediately after one holiday. They change it to the next. And they're like, well, Easter is like 3 days from now.
Yeah, so it was bad. And they're like, how can baby chicks be born? It's the middle of the winter.
Okay.
So they were getting a little freaked out, but they were like, but it can't have to do with like the earth and the rotations because that's in the Bible, and but they were like, we need to have a meeting, like the popes and the the cardinals. They were like, we all need to have a calendar meeting and discuss what to do and discuss math. And around the same time, there was this super boring, very scaredy cat, very good Catholic boy named Nicholas Copernicus.
Okay. I've heard of him.
So he was around 1473 to 1543. That's when he lived.
So what did Copernicus get up to?
So Copernicus, all these astronomy boys were supposed to be other things, by the way. So I think he was supposed to be a lawyer, but he just loved math so much. He loved math, and
well, you couldn't really make a living as an astronomer, right? You don't
No.
have, like, you needed maybe some like royalty to like pay for you to be their court astronomer, so
Which,
you'll name stuff after them.
lucky him.
Yeah.
He became a royal astronomer. And
Okay.
but he figured out, he did, some equations, he did some math that was complicated, and he figured out
Okay.
that the Earth probably revolved around the sun. But when he did figure that out, he was very scared because he was like, let me double and triple and quadruple check this because I really hope it's not right, because if it is, I'm screwed as a Catholic boy, and I'm going to be a heretic.
Because if the solar system was just the sun and the Earth, by the way, and like the moon, which orbits the Earth, that would be fine. You actually could like envision it as just the sun rotating around the Earth, because you're basically, in physics, it's the idea of a rotating frame of reference. Just the Earth becomes your steady point and the sun rotates. But once you introduce other planets, if they're not all rotating around the sun, the other planets move really weird compared to Earth. And this actually is where a ton of astrology comes from, because when you hear Mercury in retrograde, what that actually means is, from the point of view of the Earth, Mercury is moving backwards. Whereas all the planets do actually go the same direction around the sun.
Is this where Parallax is?
That's a little bit different. Parallax stars.
Parallax stars. Because that was another issue that certain people were noticing, and they were like, but what about, they were like, I have a question, but why? Do you want to explain
what
parallaxes?
Yeah, so, right, parallax is when you see two objects that are far away, but one is a little
like
bit closer.
Because we in space, but I'm a little closer.
Yeah, so a great example is when you're in a car and you look out the window and you see like a fence post on the side of the road versus like a mountain in the background. They appear to be moving relative to each other as you move past them.
True that.
They you pass one, and it looks like they're moving at different speeds, but it's because your vision of them is changing. Stars do that. So close stars versus like very far away stars, as the Earth moves, you expect your vision of them to shift a little bit. And so you don't actually see it with faraway stars because they are way too far away for that to matter. But it does matter as far as like stuff within the solar system is concerned. So that was like another like problem with the model, with the geocentric model.
So Copernicus is invited to come to the calendar meeting of the Pope and the cardinals. And he's like, okay, I'll go. I'll go.
A conclave.
I'll go.
The calendar.
But the calendar meeting.
Yeah.
They had it. You know what? They all put it in their calendars. And they all showed up except for Nicholas Copernicus because he was a pussy. He's a very, very similar to like.
To be fair, he did not want to get burned at the stake or like put on house arrest for the rest of his life, so he was very careful.
He was like, I feel weird. I don't think I can do it.
Tell these guys something that's going to make them unhappy when they can just excommunicate
I don't
me
think it's a good idea for me to like come into like the city today because I'm feeling weird because I haven't ridden the trains in a while and I don't know if they're safe.
Oh, I get what you're referencing. Okay.
Yeah. It's very similar to certain, it's very topical. It's a very topical topic. Copernicus, he was a bit of a pussy.
All right, stop harping on him. You're like, this is 5 minutes you've been talking
trash
about Copernicus. All right,
okay.
So he wouldn't publish.
He wouldn't go to the calendar meeting.
Beliefs.
He wouldn't publish his beliefs. He did have this friend who was kind of editing his papers, and sort of like taking notes for him, kind of like his intern. And there's a sort of urban legend that so Copernicus had I think he had a stroke, and he was in a coma, and then this intern comes up and is like, look, I've published your manuscript, and then Copernicus looks at it and just like dies straight like he wakes up, looks at it, and he's like, oh crap, and just like dies right after that. It is also interesting that he referenced in earlier copies of this manuscript, he referenced that original guy Aristarchus, and then in the final copy that name was taken out, and a lot of people think it was because if anyone knew that a Greek dude supported this, it would start to be taken more seriously, and people didn't want that at the time.
Yeah, this was also during the time of the Protestant Reformation too. So the Catholics were very on edge about things that might overturn Scripture, because the Protestants were very much like kind of reinterpreting the Scripture, for example, differently than the Catholics.
Yeah, and the Catholics were afraid that if you pointed out any holes in their Scripture, someone would just be like, why don't we just rewrite the whole damn thing? Why don't we just all become Protestants?
Yeah.
Why don't we kill the Pope? So, a lot of the following guys had trouble with this. So let's rattle off a couple.
So people they picked up like Copernicus's vibe though. Other like later astronomers knew about Copernicus's like theories. So it did like get out, even though the Catholic Church like suppressed a lot of it.
It got out, and they didn't actually suppress his stuff so much, because he kind of put it out as like, wouldn't it be funny?
Okay.
He never said like for sure, for serious. He was just like, here's some stuff, you can look at it or not or whatever, it's cute. He was like, feeling cute, might delete later, and I'm dead. Like that was basically like his vibe. Yeah. He was like it was like in his story, but not in his grid, if you know what I'm saying. So anyway, there was then this guy named Tycho Brahe, who I think is my favorite one.
It's spelled Tycho.
It's spelled Tycho.
Like the chill wave electronic artist Tycho.
Tycho, yeah.
But Tycho is how it's pronounced.
Tycho Brahe, what's up, Brahe?
So Tycho Brahe was also very careful with his observations. He didn't come right out.
No, he didn't. I love how it's like coming. You're like, I'm gonna come out as like.
Come out as saying the sun is the center of the solar system.
Oh, girl, I got some hot tea. No, he didn't come out. Well, I like him though, because straight off the bat, he's like way more cocky and confident. This might have been because he was rich AF, like super rich.
How rich was he?
He was so rich. He didn't have to like do any of this stuff.
Did he have extravagant pets? Was he that level of rich?
He did. He had a pet moose, and his pet moose loved to drink.
Tycho Brahe had a pet moose.
He had a pet moose because he was a Danish. He was a Danish duke. I don't know if he was a duke, but it sounds cool.
It's a cool Danish thing to say.
And yeah, he got his moose drunk, and his moose died one day because it climbed up some stairs and then fell down the stairs.
That's sad.
So he was that rich. Like, he was that dude.
Mm-hmm.
He was that Brahe.
Imagine how wide your stairs have to be if you're gonna have a
right?
moose climbing up and down.
Yeah, and
That's
his moose,
he
was like
staircase,
really. He died like he lived, drunk
and falling down the stairs.
Yeah. Or though maybe someone was like in the way, and the moose was like move. He was like move over. Mm-hmm. But Tycho observed a solar eclipse when he was 14. But the solar eclipse was predicted, but it was one day late. Mm-hmm. And Tycho, I'm just going to alternate with the pronunciations. Tycho was real pissed, and he was like, I could do better than that.
Oh, I just remember that Woody Allen bit where he's like, the moose starts to mingle.
The moose, yeah, that's exactly what was happening with this bro.
Oh, that joke was based on Tycho Brahe.
Tycho Brahe.
So then,
he starts to observe. He's like, I'm gonna observe Mars, and I'm gonna predict everything way better, and I'm gonna be the best. And I'm only 14 years old.
So he became a real astronomer. He had students, became a teacher, observed Mars very carefully.
He was like, I got my eye on you, Mars. I see you, bro. Brahi.
Yeah, because Mars is a very, like, they knew that the planets were different, and they also had, by this time, they developed telescopes. So they, like, planets look different than stars in telescopes. Stars still look like a little twinkle, whereas a planet looks like a disk.
He was, so he was, right, he was like a little bit older than Galileo, who we'll talk about, but his time overlapped, so in his, like, later life, they had telescopes, but in his earlier life, they had binoculars, which they were using a lot, so he was, like, doing binocular things, which I guess worked fine, just to clarify.
Yeah, you can look at space with binoculars.
It's like 2 telescopes in one. And you can go to the opera. It's great. It's fantastic. He also came up with his own system, because there was the Copernican system, and then he came up with the Tucoian system or something like that.
So he came up with
the Brahian.
The mixed geocentric system, because so once again, tiptoeing around the Catholics, you couldn't just say the sun was at the center of the solar system, even that was like the obvious solution to all these like issues with like trying to track planets. Instead, what he proposed, he was like, okay, the Earth is still the center of the universe, the sun orbits the Earth, but all the other planets orbit the sun, so at least their movement makes sense, and I can just plot it as a simple like ellipse.
Yeah.
Tuca didn't go that far. He didn't figure out it was an ellipse. But Tuca was like, they orbit the sun because otherwise I can't explain any of this crap that like we keep saying.
Yeah.
But maybe Earth is just stationary, and that's like Earth is at the center.
Yeah. So I love how he's like, don't worry. Earth is still, but hear me out. It's okay. It's all right. We don't have to get worked out. That was his vibe.
They also, at the time, like, they didn't know what planets or stars were made of, too, right? So they're like, well, they're in the air. They must be very light. And whereas Earth is this big, solid, rocky thing. So surely, like, this thing we're standing on can't be flying through space. This has to be the center. Yeah. And that stuff is probably made of ether or air or, like, light.
One of the elementals.
So it's like, it's fine that, like, that stuff's moving around really fast.
Yeah, and they were like, if Earth was moving, then we would know. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's true. That actually
would
is
feel
one of Galileo's theories, which we'll get to.
Then there was this dude named Johannes Kepler. Mm-hmm. And he... Oh, yeah. So Brahe dies because he won't pee. That's legit, like, why he dies. Okay.
Because he had a kidney stone, I think.
So he was like at this dinner that lasted for 2.
It's weird to attribute it to him being stubborn.
I think he was. He had a moose,
I don't think that's why
he fed it alcohol.
Yeah.
They both died from drinking too much.
Huh.
Except he died because he wouldn't pee. And right before he died, he was like, Johannes, here's my notes. You can have them. I love you, bro. And he gave it to him.
That's kind of a romanticized version.
Yeah, I'm a romantic.
Right. But Kepler was studying under Brahe.
Yeah.
But, and Kepler wanted to continue Brahe's studies, and Brahe had taken these, like, years and years of detailed notes of Mars and the movement, and so Kepler was like, I want to calculate what the orbit is, because I don't think it's a circle. That doesn't make sense with what we're seeing. And it actually took Kepler 2 years to get a hold of Brahe's notes, because Brahe's, like, his papers went to his, like, children, his executors of his will. And Kepler had to, like, even back then, like, property rights and copyright was a big thing. So Kepler had to, like, negotiate getting a hold of the notes. But then he did.
Yes.
And then he spent 2 years doing the math.
The maths.
He tried over 40 different equations to fit the observations to some kind of orbit that would make sense of, like, how Mars was moving. And then the answer, as we all know today, is an ellipse. The planets move in an ellipse with the sun at one focus of the ellipse. And he didn't try it at first because he thought it was too simple. And surely, like, some previous astronomer would have already tried that because it seemed like such an obvious solution.
And he also was a little afraid because he was like, they gonna get me. The Catholic Church is gonna be real mad. So him and his wife, Barbara, they talked in codes. They passed each other notes with, like, emojis and whatnot. They were like, up arrow, Saturn, smiley face, down arrow, heart, wrapped gift, gun, panda.
But eventually, everybody found out what Tesla was writing. Or sorry, not
Kepler. Yeah,
Kepler.
they never found out what he was writing.
What Kepler was writing, and then he has a supernova named after him.
He does.
Kepler's supernova appeared in the sky in the early 1600s, and so Kepler observed it, is why it was named after him. But who else saw it?
Galileo. So Galileo.
Also not originally meant to be an astronomer. He was
right.
He was born to a lutenist. A ludist?
A lutist, someone who liked to lute.
His dad was a guitarist. His dad was a lute star, and he originally was trained on the lute. He was an excellent lute player. Yeah. But then he also, I think, was going to study to become a doctor.
Yep. But then he loved math, and he kept sneaking out of his doctor classes to go to math rallies where they were just like 2 and plus sign and minus and equals, and he was like, oh my God, I love it. And he was like putting his lighter up, his candle up and whatnot. He just loved the math, and he was like, I just love doing math. Mm-hmm. I just love it. And he made some observations. He didn't become an astronomer until like a bit later in his life, really until he got into telescopes and binoculars. And
he was in his 40s.
Yeah, and he lived a while. He lived from 1564 to 1642, which is like what?
So early in his life, he invented a new type of scale, basically a new hydrostatic balance. It was called in his 20s. So he was inventing scientific equipment, studying gravity by dropping different weights
off the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
Off the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and realizing that like objects accelerate at the same rate.
Yeah, he's like, my friend is just as pissed at me because I've dropped 2 things on him.
Regardless of how heavy they are. Because back then they thought that heavy things fell faster.
And he's like, no, but there was like a Greek text that talked, I think Aristotle was like, when there's hail, the heavier hail first. And Galileo was like, you wrong, bitch. I'm doing this right now. I'm watching a hailstorm and you wrong. Yeah. But he got like super obsessed with telescopes, and there were telescopes outside of the area that he was in, and he was like, I can make those, and he kind of like looked at one, and he figured out how to make one that was like 20 times stronger than the current ones. Mm-hmm.
Well, he was in Florence, yeah.
Yeah.
So and he made better telescopes.
Italians at that time were very insular, so they were like, an Italian-made telescope. They're like, we want to keep it in Italy. So they were
The Italians were leaders at glass blowing, too. And, like, forming glass, right? So, like, Murano glass is still regarded as, like, some of the finest glass in the world, which they make near Venice.
He got black market glass. He was like, shh, don't tell nobody. And he took it and he grinded it. He grinded his glass and he made some cool telescopes, and he saw a lot of really crazy things. He discovered the 4 primary moons of Jupiter, the rings of Saturn.
By the way, this is all...
the Milky Way.
It's cool that he could do all this stuff just because he had better equipment than everyone. That was, like, the big difference.
Yeah.
Right? I think, like, it's probably likely that, like, Kepler was smarter because he was, like, doing all this stuff based in math and, like, based on theory. Newton was certainly, like, way smarter. Newton came later. But, like, Galileo just had better tools. He was a better engineer and made better equipment. So he discovered all this stuff.
He was like, wow, but, so cool.
Yeah, he observed the first moons of other planets, which, like, no one believed him at first. They were like, there is no way that there are, like, planets orbiting another, or moons orbiting another planet. That can't be. The Earth is the center of the universe. And he was like, check it out. Here's a telescope.
Like, take a look at this. He had, so there were a couple popes. A couple popes that he got in trouble with, and there were a couple cardinals that they think there's Cardinal Bellarmine, who was kind of like his boy.
He was friends with the local cardinal.
Yeah.
They were buddies. And
they were buddies. And
he dedicated like several of his like tracts, his like writings or letters or papers to this cardinal.
Yeah.
So he was like, in the glory of this, like of the Catholic Church, I have seen a moon around Jupiter.
Yeah. And you know, he would sort of ask the cardinal, he'd be like, do you think it would be okay if I like said this? Will I die? And this was like the heat of the Reformation. Like this was like Lutheran stuff was going down, and like witch hunt and the plague. It was just like a whole slew of things. So, you know, Galileo was grinding glass, and he was walking on eggshells. And there became a problem because the Pope didn't want him. Pope Urban, I believe, did not want him.
Not Pope Urban.
Not Pope Urban.
It was the Pope before Urban.
Yes.
Thought Galileo was like treading very close to like and Galileo just came out and was like sun center of the universe too. By the way, also that was the major observation of this. In addition to like, he saw Saturn's rings, then Saturn rotated and he couldn't see the rings because they were horizontal, and then a couple years later he saw them again. He was like, "What is going on?" Saturn remained a mystery. He also saw the phases of Venus. So much like our moon has different phases, Venus does too.
Which means if Venus has phases,
then it has
what does
to
that
be,
mean?
Yes, then Venus must be... Not only does Venus have to be rotating around the sun for it to have phases, but Earth has to also, if from Earth you're able to see all the phases of Venus. If Earth was in the center, then like you would only see 2 of the phases of Venus. So he saw that, which he was like, oh, the sun's probably the center of the universe. And then he had a real dumbass theory, which was wrong, where he thought the tides were caused by the Earth moving around, which is totally wrong. They're caused by the moon, and everybody actually knew this. People have known this for a very long time, that the tides correspond to the moon. Whatever. So that was his big argument.
So the Pope, this Pope like sixth this or something. I don't know, the sixth Pope. Sixtus. He was like, you getting hot. You getting real hot. You like, you are getting
cool your jets, boy.
Cool. They were like, he was like, shh. Let's, you know, and Galileo was like, look, I don't want to combine this with scripture. I just want to like add stuff and measure things and just say the truth. And I love Jesus and I love Catholicism and like, I am not against it, but can't they be separate? And I want to say the truth. And they
let him off the hook.
Well, they kind of did, because there was like, they didn't have a photocopier at the time. So there was one thing that the papacy got that was like, Galileo can never say any of these things again. And then there was like a school note that Galileo got that was like, you can say this, but you just can't say it's like a fact. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was that, and then there comes...
So then Bellarmine, who was Galileo's boy, becomes Pope, and now he's Pope Urban. Yeah.
Really?
It was a couple years later.
Oh, okay.
And Galileo's cool with Pope Urban, and Pope Urban is like, you know, you can, like, write about the, like, your heliocentric view. You should write it as a dialogue, maybe, a Socratic dialogue, and give equal weight to the geocentric and the heliocentric. Don't come down on either side. And Urban was like, he's like, we're boys, we go back a ways. I'm very, like, geocentric. That's what the Catholics say. That's scripture. You see some, like, evidence for heliocentric, go ahead and write a dialogue. That should be fun.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So Galileo publishes, or, you know, he's got this book, and it's his dialogue.
It's on the two systems of the world.
Yeah, and it's, like, between Smartius Maximus and, like, Dummius Accius, and you can all guess which one the Pope is.
The name of the geocentric guy, who clearly is the Pope,
is like Simplistico.
Simplicio. Which in Italian just means simpleton.
Dumbass, right? So the Pope is like, ooh, girl, ooh, I used to like you, but now I don't like you, and you gonna die. So there's all these trials, there's all this like back and forth kind of stuff. But basically Galileo has to, he like kind of like gets the plague and is like dying. And so they don't really like torture him, but they kind of...
He avoided corporal punishment because they said he was suspected of high heresy, but not convicted of it.
They're like, we think that you thought bad thoughts.
He recanted everything that he had said. Some scholars now feel that like the whole dialogue thing was actually a setup, and they were like trying to get him in trouble by suggesting that he write it.
But no one knows for sure because like they're all such catty bitches, and like you can never tell with the letters. Like the Pope,
So he was on house arrest for the rest of his life. He wrote up some more papers based on studies he'd done a long time
about
before.
Magnets, which I just...
Materials.
I love it. He's like, I just want to write about science. I need to. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna write about magnets. I'm gonna measure magnets. Yeah. So let's see. Well, we can blow through a couple of these boys. We'll make a couple little pit stops. Right.
In the history of astronomy.
And we're gonna catch ourselves up real quick to... We're gonna sort of warp speed.
We're gonna get from the early 1600s
to the space race in like 10 minutes, and then
we have a guest joining.
We have a guest
who I saw his
yeah.
So
so we got Giovanni Cassini measured how long it took the planets Jupiter and Mars to rotate. He discovered the 4 moons of Saturn, the gap in the planets' rings. Then there was Christian Huygens. Proposed the earliest theory about the nature of light.
So there's lots of spacecraft named after these people, like Cassini spacecraft.
And moons like Saturn's moons. One real quick thing Galileo did that was very cool that we forgot that I have to mention. He, at one point, said he used Dante's Inferno to, like, say how tall Satan was, which I think is cool. That was just... When I was reading about these measurements, I was like, oh, we have to mention that.
It's really wild. Yeah, how good, like, people are... Just humans in general compartmentalizing, like, the things they have no idea about versus, like, stuff they're pretty sure of. So he was like,
well, Dante said this. He was as tall as this.
Like, today so now... I'm, like, calculating the height of Satan, and then let's go study those moons of Saturn.
Yeah.
All right, let's go out to the terrace.
And then there's Sir Isaac Newton, famous for the disgusting cookie that is named after him.
So Newton can't be passed over quickly. We have to stop on Newton for a minute because Newton, in addition to being an astronomer, was like kind of the father of, invented calculus.
Father of dads.
Invented calculus at the same time as Leibniz, but also is kind of the father of modern like mathematics and mechanical physics. And so describing the natural world through some basic physical properties, like he came up with. And yes. Newton, like, realizing that, like, gravity on Earth behaves the same as gravity for the planets, that it's this universal force, was Newton.
And he discovered this by throwing apples off the Earth.
Well, so it also made a lot of people much happier, I guess, with, like, the state of knowledge, human knowledge of the universe. Because prior to Newton, post-Galileo, everybody kind of had to adapt the heliocentric model after that. Like, the sun's the center of the universe. The planets are moving around it. They had no idea why they were moving, right? They're like, what's pushing the planets?
What are they in a hurry for?
Yeah, and if the Earth is moving around the sun, this giant rock I'm on, like, what's pushing that? And so there were, like, theories about the ether. They didn't, like, get it, really. So Newton, by theorizing everything in terms of, like, force, right, and, like, objects moving in a predictable way, he was like, no, the laws that God set up are, like, what's creating the motion. It's still this, like, it's like a clock, right? There's, like, a clockmaker who wound up the clock, and it's, like, running.
It's God's clock.
And then, yeah, cool name of metal band.
God's clock. Yeah.
But it really did make everyone much happier, and the church embraced Newton, like, in part because of this. He like, brought harmony back to, like, the observations.
He said, let's hug. We love you. Also, he was a little bit crazy, and he was really into some crazy stuff, and maybe part of the Illuminati, and he, like, did some crazy alchemy experiments in his spare time.
Yeah, as good as they were at astronomy and, like, mechanical physics back then, they really weren't ready to tackle chemistry yet. There was still a lot of alchemy going on. Although
we're gonna
the
need
alchemists
a bigger
came
boat.
up with some stuff, but we'll save that for the chemistry episode.
Yeah. So then there was...
Oh, how tall is Satan?
How tall
one
is
of the
Satan?
viewers is wondering. Did you come across it?
Satan is as tall as the Kentucky Derby is long. He is... Yeah, I found like a bunch of comparisons and I forgot the actual number, but I got more into the comparisons of things. So however long the Kentucky...
How did he come up with it? Just like the different like circles of hell? He figured out how deep they were?
No, because there's like references in Dante's Inferno that are like, Satan came up to the nipple of the hell demon monster in the 10th circle. And so he's like, and we know from chapter 1 that the hell demon monster came up to the eyeball of the frog, and he like deducted...
I regret asking that question. Let's
It was all like a weird math, a weird logic problem in middle school where they're like,
I know the problem.
Yeah, we all know that problem. That's where they got it from, basically.
Right. Anyone else we got to mention?
There's Edmund Halley, Halley's Comet. There's Charles Meiser, who had this like crazy ass database of celestial objects.
So Halley, by the way, a very cool thing he realized, right, is that a comet that came through the solar system in 1607 and then like 1682 was the same comet, which is a pretty cool thing to guess and be right on.
He was like, "Hi, friend."
That's wild. Yeah.
Reunion, comet reunion, Halley's reunion. Woo! You can get the sweatshirts at Salvation Army. So there was also William Herschel, who's better known for his boo, Caroline Herschel, who was the first woman to discover a comet. Mm-hmm. And then there was Henrietta Swan, who is one of several women working as a human computer at Harvard College. She identified images of variable stars, and she discovered something known as a Cepheid variable. So it's like she studied the relationship of like the pulsations of stars. She took their pulse and she was like, my heart beats stars. that was her. Then there's Albert Einstein, Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all know about him. We all know about him.
General and special relativity.
Our boy with his tongue out doing equations. E=mc². Right? Mm-hmm. Do you need to say anything more about him?
I mean, well, right, Einstein, like, kind of shattered prior to him, like, the conception that, like, there are fixed knowable laws and, like, I guess, locations and states in the universe, right? Because relativity kind of says that it actually depends on your frame of observation. And so, like, the speed of light is the only constant, and then everything else is relative to you as an observer, which... It's right. He like generated testable theories. Yeah.
He also discovered an entity, or like came up with space-time, which I love. Mm. Anything space hyphenated, There's space-time.
Yeah. Einstein's gonna get. We'll do an entire episode.
We'll do an Einstein episode.
Einstein is especially wild because I believe it's 1909 it's known as the golden year or whatever, and Einstein, I guess it like just quit his job as a patent clerk. And came up with basically, like, wrote 4 papers in that year that are all Nobel Prize worthy, that are, like, all completely changed physics. So, in addition to just, like...
He's bigger than the universe.
In addition to special relativity, also did, like, he didn't win a Nobel Prize for relativity, actually. He won it for...
Gag.
How radiation, black body radiation it's called, like how radiation translates into certain light frequencies. That's what he won it for.
Ooh.
And he had 2 other wild papers that same year.
He was wild. He was wild like his hair.
Pretty amazing.
He was absolutely crazy.
All right.
So there's also
we're now into the
Edwin Hubble, who's like a telescope dude number 2.
The telescope's named after Hubble. Hubble didn't invent the telescope.
Yeah, and I love it. They're like, he calculated a small blob in the sky that existed outside of the Milky Way. Mm-hmm. The discussions of the size of the universe were divided as to whether or not a single galaxy existed, and then after him they were like, oh, it's probably more. But I love that like everyone who has a telescope is like Milky Way.
No, Hubble realized that the universe is expanding, which is a very important thing.
I don't like to think about that.
That Stephen Hawking later added to.
I don't like it. I don't want to think about it. It makes me creepy. Freaks
Okay.
me out. It freaks me out.
So that was Hubble's main realization.
Yeah, I don't like him.
Universe expanding.
He can be quiet.
But the reason that's really relevant,
It's 'cause
not
it's
just
scary.
that it's expanding, is because that informs how did the universe start.
I don't like that either. I don't like it started.
It's
and
cosmology getting scary.
Yeah, I like cosmetology.
Yeah.
I like cosmic, but yeah. Whew. Okay. Then there's Frank Drake. Frank Drake is cool because.
Here, let's come back to. Can we come back to all these? Can we take our guest?
Can I get us up to the space race? And then we can take our guest because we need context. We need context.
All right, I keep explaining the stuff that they did. Keep going.
Frank Drake, extraterrestrials. He started the foundation for them.
Drake really was obsessed with aliens.
He loved
but he
aliens.
approached aliens in a mathematical way. So if you guys Wikipedia this, the Drake equation is sort of the answer to the Fermi Paradox.
Which I don't know what that is.
Because Fermi was a particle physicist, but Fermi posed the question: if there are a bunch of like habitable Earth-like planets and there's aliens out there, where are they? Why haven't they contacted us? Why haven't they shown up
we
yet?
are dumb.
So Drake answered the question. Drake said, "Well, let's calculate this. Like, first off, you need an Earth-like planet. How many?
Okay, I don't.
How many are
girl.
those? You need a civilization that gets to be like."
But I know the
through
answer.
space.
I don't know the math, but I know the answer. And he's like, "Cause we dumb."
What's the probability that civilization exists the same time as our civilization, where they could contact us?
Also, who can like they're he's like also where they don't care about us.
So if you add up all those factors and you're like, but still no one has contacted us, then one or several of the factors in that equation must be close to zero.
Yeah, word. And the zero is like our IQ compared to aliens is. And I love, so he was like too extra for any of like the colleges except for Cornell. And so he was like there.
Where Nabokov taught and also where Thomas Pynchon went.
Right. They were too extra for all the colleges as well. And you know who else was? Carl Sagan. Mm-hmm. Carl Sagan was like teaching at Harvard and then he was like, I'm a little into aliens and they were like, off to Cornell you go. And he was like,
think he was British.
I'm
pretty sure he was American.
And when he was at Harvard, he was pretending. They were like, that's how he got in. Mm-hmm. They were like, off to Cornell, and he was like, thanks, because my daddy, mentor, alien father is there. Mm-hmm. And him and Frank Drake, they like rode out on the aliens.
Okay, so we're now up to the 60s and the start of the space race.
Yes, we are. So there's a space race that has a lot to do with the Cold War and America and Russia.
Can we take our guest?
And we can take our guest. Who's going to talk about the space race with us. Yeah, so let's... Oh, he might not be taken right now. Click. Oh, wait, yes, we can. Ooh.
Oh, no.
So, Buttered Roll, if you want to go live with us, we're ready. We ready for you.
I don't know if we can take a guess. Have we paused comments or something?
Nope. Nope. Oh, wait. Oh, perhaps. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. There we go. Things take a while in space-time. Space-time, one word. Hello. Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, welcome.
How are you?
We're doing great. How are you?
We're just floating around.
Well, I love your outfits.
Thank you.
I feel underdressed.
No, you're doing great. I'm
not wearing like Cortex or anything.
That's actually how the astronauts dress on the space station.
Yeah.
Though. They just kind of hang out in t-shirts. So
we're just we're posers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So you can assume that I'm an astronaut on the space station.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So you want to?
Can you see me?
We can see you.
Okay. Good.
Can you see us?
I cannot.
Ooh.
It's just like a black box for you guys.
Oh yeah, look.
Ooh.
It's having trouble.
Let's see. Okay.
It might be our Wi-Fi.
Oh, but you have to put a thing in for him. Yeah?
It might be our space antenna. I don't know.
The thing.
We have a Twitch stream going as well. So
Gotcha.
he's checking it on the Twitch. He's seeing what's going on. He's
Cool.
seeing. We can hear you, and you can hear us, right?
I can hear you guys. Yes.
Okay.
But I want to keep your beautiful face as well.
Well,
And there's a crazy echo going.
Let's see.
What Wi-Fi are you on?
If I check.
It's okay.
Which one?
You're on the right one.
Yep, I know.
Well, I don't know.
Whoop. Okay. Well, we were on the right one.
Well, let's
so,
check.
okay, well, at least this might work. It's great because we can edit this. Technical. Is this?
Any better?
I can't see you guys yet, but I can see myself, but no echo this time, so that's good.
Okay, that's good.
All right. Well,
All right.
just treat it like a phone call,
Yeah,
I suppose.
because this is going to be a podcast, so
Yeah.
they won't be able to
Okay.
see either ones of us.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm down.
So we can just pretend like we're all wearing spacesuits right now, or not. You know?
I'm
All right.
good at pretending.
Woo. Okay.
Well, that's bad. We can change the cover later, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah, you can.
Is the volume all the way up?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, yeah, just quickly post this and we'll edit it later. Yikes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Damn it. Oh, we are still recording. Well, we'll edit this. We'll edit this on the
We
Twitch as well.
are. Yeah, we'll edit.
Oh, we lost our guest. We should have him on the phone, maybe.
Yeah.
Just speakerphone him.
Yeah. We could do that. We could. Should I send him a text?
I suppose, or just try it again, because it seems
No,
like
it's
the
gonna
Twitch,
keep- it's
the
gonna
Twitch
keep-
feed's doing great.
It's gonna keep like kicking us off, I feel like.
It's a weird Instagram thing.
Joining my special guest.
Woo! Okay. Let's see. Live. Let's do this again. All right. Back. We back.
Well, let's. You're gonna give it one more shot.
Oh, they have like rooms. Maybe it's because Instagram now has like rooms, and we don't know how to use that.
I just think it's. I don't know. The rooms aren't stable.
The rooms aren't stable, Jerry.
Stable kids.
Oh no. All right. So, Space Part 2.
Okay.
Space Part 2. So yeah, if our guest pops back in here, we'll send him our phone number, and he can call us
Oh yeah, we'll speakerphone them.
virtually. So should we talk about the space race a little bit in the meantime?
Yeah. So, what event kicked off the space race?
Well, the war.
Let's back up a
Oh,
little
okay.
bit. We'll back up a little bit. So, right, World War II, the Germans had a bunch of rocket scientists, and the U.S. had pretty good scientists, but we weren't really specializing in rockets. So, Werner von Braun.
Wait, that's like going forward a little bit, I feel like. Because that was way after the space race and the moon happened.
He was still alive,
Yeah.
but he's kind of the father of the V2 rocket, which was used in World War II.
Okay, oh, so we talking about World War II. Okay, so World War II, Americans were really scared that their penises were not big enough to defeat the other world powers. And
No, come on. The Germans basically launched a ton of rockets and hit London and like killed a bunch of people.
the Blitz. Hello, I'm the Brit. The Blitz. The Brits Blitz.
Because the Germans they couldn't actually invade or cross the English Channel, but they like kept bombing buildings from very far away
Yeah.
and using their superior rockets that could like accurately go hundreds of miles.
Like I said.
So post World War II, the Americans captured all the Nazi rocket scientists.
Well, pause. So there were like some presidents that we should talk about, right? So there was, and this
Okay, let's try to bring them on again.
Oh, I feel like, wait, hang on. Okay.
We need to make a room or something?
Yeah. So let's see.
Put them in a room.
We're gonna try to go live with our guest, and if it doesn't work, we'll send him our phone number. Okay.
Okay.
Yes,
Hey, can you see us?
I can see you guys.
Great.
Oh, wow, we
Okay.
did
Woo! It worked. Yay.
Perfect.
Okay, so we were just talking about
The
space race and the different like scientists that worked on it, and someone told us that you have some information on that you would like to share.
I do. So yeah, my interests tend to jump around kind of all over the place with history and historical events and people specifically. So there's a dude that I've been researching recently. His name is Jack Parsons. Now Jack Parsons, notes here.
Ooh, notes. We love
Jack
notes.
Parsons, I do, was one of the founding members of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which NASA gained access to and ownership over in 1958, which is the same year that Eisenhower also
Yes.
signed NASA into existence.
Yes.
So I believe Eisenhower signed them into existence in July, and
Yep.
Jet Propulsion Laboratory became part of NASA in December of 1958.
This is true. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
so Parsons was a bit of an eccentric. He was, for the majority, self-taught as a rocket scientist. He attended Stanford for a brief period of time, but for the most part was self-taught and basically learned rocket science by blowing up buildings.
Oh my God.
Not intentionally.
Yeah.
Just
Never.
accidentally, in failed experiments or
Was
whatever.
this at Stanford?
No. So it was at Caltech. But Parsons was a West Coast native, born in 1914, and in Pasadena, California. He grew up pretty affluently. And in 1928, he met this dude named Ed Foreman. And him and Ed Foreman and this other dude, where is his name? Give me a second.
No worries.
Frank Molina. So we have Frank Molina, Ed Foreman, and Jack Parsons. And they sort of, together with Frank Molina's graduate advisor, Mr. Theodore von Karman, they sort of teamed up and used some of the labs at Caltech and started Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Now, sort of interestingly, evidently they had to use the majority of their initial budget to repair the buildings at Caltech that they had been destroying. Interestingly enough, this is not really where Parsons' interest with rocketry came from. He started messing around with rockets when he was only 14 years old.
Wow.
With Foreman. They were friends in high school, at the military high school, sense of humor. So he took some of the composite that he was messing with and blew up the school's plumbing. And
Nice.
LOL.
That's awesome.
So around that same time, when Parsons was still a teenager, he also discovered the occult, and he discovered Aleister Crowley.
Yes.
Specifically Aleister Crowley's poetry, and also some other writings like Arthurian mythology.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And also specifically Jules Verne.
Nice.
Sci-fi Jules Verne and stuff like that, which really led him to have an interest in rockets, which he also shared with Foreman. Another part of this that I found super interesting was that they weren't really keen on the name rocketry because there was like a stigma attached to it. So
Yeah.
Okay.
As there be.
Sort of, in the way that art imitates life, life imitates art. Rocketry comes from science fiction writing.
Yeah.
That term. So they, sort of started talking about it as jet propulsion instead of rocketry,
Okay.
which is really where the name of their laboratory came from as well. Was Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which, like I said before, became part of NASA in 1958. Now, in 1936, there was a fourth member of the team that joined, and I don't know how to pronounce this person's name. He was Chinese, but his name is Qian, Qian, and his last name is Shushen, maybe, Xeusen, and he joined the group in 1937. He was a Chinese mathematician, and together, the four of them, Parsons, Molina, Shushen, and Foreman, were known as the Suicide Squad.
Yes.
Caltech. Mostly because
They're blowing stuff
people
up.
and the other students at Caltech thought they were doing stuff as well. Interestingly enough, it was reported that during their experiments, the launches, all of this stuff, the early days, the late 30s, early 40s, Parsons would actually recite Aleister Crowley's poetry during these launches, which I found super interesting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So they were actually asked to leave Caltech. They didn't want them blowing up their buildings any longer. So after that, they went to a place called Arroyo Seco Canyon, which Parsons and Foreman had been familiar with as kids. They had, before they had ever, gotten military funding or gotten governmental funding, Parsons and Foreman used Arroyo Seco Canyon to, do their really amateur experiments with rocketry. So they went back to Arroyo Seco, and on Halloween Day of 1936, at Arroyo Seco Canyon, which is also called Devil's Canyon, because there's a rock formation that is looks pretty similar to the head of a devil. They had their first liquid-fueled motored rocket test on that day, Halloween 1936, of all days. And so Jet Propulsion Laboratory marks that, Halloween 1936, as their founding event. I'm wondering, I couldn't find anything to say so, but I'm wondering if, during this event, did Parsons, recite Aleister Crowley's poetry or anything like that? I'm
Probably.
if he did. And that would certainly be interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure. I don't really know too much about Crowley, but I am learning about him as well. And specifically his poetry. I've found examples of his poetry that are really interesting, really dope.
Yeah,
Some of it is really dope.
He was able to travel and whatnot because of his poetry and that was like his ticket around the globe.
For sure, yeah, he's an interesting dude, for sure. He got kicked out of more countries than I've been kicked out of bars.
Yep.
Which is impressive.
Yeah, yes, true.
Yeah, very impressive. So, in 1939, Crowley had already been in the country, I believe.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
In 1939, there was a lodge called the Agape Lodge that Crowley had founded, I believe, somewhere in Pasadena, California. And in 1939, Parsons was taken to a Gnostic Mass at the Agape Lodge, and from that point in time on, he joined. And actually, eventually, I believe somewhere around 1941, he became, I'm not sure what the title is, but like the leader of that lodge. So
like
while he was
the
still
priest.
working for the organizations that predated NASA and were eventually going to become part of NASA, he was an occultist. He was a devotee to the religion of the Lama.
Yeah. Which is, it's so interesting. That's a lot like Isaac Newton. I mean, not the limo, but he was into some weird stuff. Yeah.
Sure.
And so we were also talking about like all the foundation to like discover aliens, to say hi to aliens and whatnot. Like a lot of these science bros were also like, but maybe science fiction too, which is interesting because you don't see that in like other areas of like smart things, right? Like you don't see like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like that happens especially in like science.
You think a lot of astronomers are also science fiction enthusiasts? I
Yeah.
guess, right? Like Kepler wrote the first ever
Yeah,
science
Kepler
fiction story.
wrote the first science fiction.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys mentioned Werner von Braun as well.
We're
Yeah.
just starting to talk about Werner. But
Parsons, I don't know how this worked out, but Parsons actually had extensive communication with Werner von Braun when he was still a teenager. So prior to any of the official stuff, somehow he got in touch over the phone with von Braun when he was in, Nazi Germany, working for the Nazis.
Oh,
He
wow.
had extensive communication through the phone.
Wow. Yeah, because Werner was really good at doing the rocket thing. So he was like, bro, we both like blowing stuff up. Tell me how you do this.
There was a huge debate about like solid fuel versus liquid fuel rockets too.
Which factored, I mean, that factored a lot into the space race. Because like the Russians knew, they're like, we know what to do, but we're not going to tell you. And the Americans were like, we don't know what to do.
The Russians beat Americans to launching,
Yeah.
satellites.
They put it, yeah. It's so funny. We have a score sheet, which I think is really funny. It's like, this one, the U.S. one. This one, the U.S. has. We can
show it off.
Well, we can.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be backwards.
It's a whole list. Well, then they can't read it. But
well, we can go.
It's got a whole bunch scoreboard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yo, if you can remember, take a snap of that and send it to me. If you can remember.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I was gonna ask. So, was Parsons then? Was he involved in like U.S. like? I guess, like, technology development during World War II?
He was, yeah. They got, I believe, Jet Propulsion Laboratory got a military contract in 1942. Yeah, like, right upon entry into the Second World War, they got a military contract. They had their first successful rocket-assisted fixed-wing craft launched in August of 1941. And then immediately following that, they were contracted to produce rocket engines for the military.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I love that. That's like a great, great resume. They're like, see the proof? Okay, all right, we need a job. And so you said you had a project. You personally have a project that's related, that has to do with space right now, or?
Yeah, it's certainly not really. It has to do with. One element of it is space. So I have a show coming up.
Ooh.
It opened March 26th at Smush Gallery in Jersey City, New Jersey. It's about 23 pieces of visual art that will be displayed in the gallery. But I guess one of the characters in the show, so the show is called X Island Orange, right?
Nice.
So one of the characters in the show is outer space, is space. The show is a lot of the imagery is very oriented around creating my mythology. And the characters sort of, a lot of the scenes that are depicted in the paintings take place in outer space.
Okay.
Ooh, we love that.
Yeah.
If you want to put the details in the comments, and then we'll put you in the show notes. And this is coming out like tonight, so it'll definitely be out on all the platforms.
Great.
Um,
And I guess I think another, if I can just mention one other.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sort of, and I've been looking for a term for this, but interestingly enough, I have a very big interest in watch science fiction movies, like without hiding under my couch.
yes.
And I also I have a so my mother always retells this story um, where I was taken to Space Mountain as a kid. I think I was around like 6 or 7 years old, and if you've ever been to Space Mountain,
Yep.
you know there's basically two parts of the ride. There's the roller coaster, and then there's just a tram that sort of goes through
The diorama.
actual Space Mountain. Like, super slow, like just chill.
Yeah.
Thing. So they took me on the tram. My mother said by the end of the ride, I was hiding under the seat, and they had to literally pry like my hands like off of the actual seat mechanism to get me off the ride. That's how scared I was.
Oh wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Space Mountain was kind of like a tactic to get America like really pumped up about the space race and the astronauts and the Americans fighting the Russians in space. And that's interesting though, because you were like, you kind of predicted, you know, you were like, or you echoed the complications and like trauma that it would cause. Which,
sure.
We're going to discuss. But, I mean, yeah, Space Mountain can be scary. It can be...
Yeah, it wasn't the roller coaster part that scared me. It's the visual.
The visual
aspect.
stuff, yeah. I'm the same way with, like, the TV, like, centered, like, rides. Like, I can't process it. So, I'm the same way. Like, in, like, a little kid's ride where they're, like, watch the TV with glasses, I'm like, oh my god. Like, I just like freak. I'm just like, I don't know what to do with my hands or my face.
Yeah.
So yeah. Which is probably how astronauts, that's probably how they feel. You probably had a very realistic, you were like, this is virtual reality. I'm in space right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, coming along with like the actual. So when I do sit down, because I do sort of force myself to watch science fiction movies, because I'm sort of trying to like what's that type of therapy where you're
exposure
or whatever.
Yeah, exposure therapy.
Exposure
Therapy.
Yeah.
Sort of trying to give myself a crash course in exposure therapy. It's not working at all. Not working at all. Like, but anyway, so I sort of do have a some sort of sensory experience, like when I watch science fiction movies, where if I actually focus on the television or focus on the screen, I can sort of feel myself like levitating towards it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe go outside and watch the actual stars.
Yeah. Or
that'll fuck me up too.
Yeah. I freaked. Yeah, it was like, oh, this is he's moving or something, and I was like, don't say that. I was like, whoop, okay, all right, we're putting that back in the box. I know it exists, but let's not talk about it. Yeah. So, well,
yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Have you been to like an observatory to like look at a telescope before?
I've been to a planetarium before, which, yeah, that was not the brightest idea. Yeah, that was not the brightest. But yeah, I've been to a planetarium. I mean, I can't like, if an image of space comes up on my phone, like 9 times out of 10, I can't look at it.
How's this right now? Our back.
That's okay.
Okay.
I think it's mostly because you guys are in front of it, though. Like, if you guys were not in front of it, it would be probably a different story.
Oh, okay.
So maybe, yeah, you could start out with like 2 people in front, and then you could take away one. You could put like a cat.
A cat in front.
Yeah, I love how we both went to cat.
Or dog, friendly dog like Leica.
Yeah, friendly dog,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah.
Maybe a buttered roll after that.
Yep. Maybe a moon.
Moon in front of a moon.
Maybe, you know,
Okay.
you can just see what, you know, you could go through the images. But or you could also tune in. Okay, this might be a helpful thing. On Saturday, we're having a thrown by 2 people space rave with Ariel Circus acts inspired by space, and with green screen visuals. So there'll be one or real visuals So there'll be one person in front of them. If you tune in on Twitch or Instagram, you can see it.
Fantastic.
You can watch us go through space, and maybe it'll help.
Oh, I wanted to ask if there were further Parsons facts that you wanted to give us. Like once he became, started working for NASA, what else happened?
So actually, Parsons did not ever work for NASA.
Oh.
Parsons was expelled from the Suicide Squad, or expelled from the group in 1944. So prior to NASA ever being signed into existence,
oh, wow.
Parsons was expelled from the group. But I mean, the work that Parsons did, as he was primarily the chemist.
Mm-hmm.
So the work that he did, I think, is partly at least still being used today. So regardless of whether he was expelled or not, his work was foundational for the group. But he was expelled because he was actually being investigated by the FBI for quite a few different things.
They're like, where do we start?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a little bit about it, and and you can drop the information for your show in the comments, and then we'll put it in our notes.
I will.
Yeah, and then maybe we'll see you also on Saturday virtually in our Space Time Lounge.
I will try to stop by.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys.
See you, Jason.
Yes. Woo! All right, we shall. Let's see if we can.
How the room works?
How the room works? We don't know how.
You don't know how to leave a room?
How do we leave the room? We know how to go.
I have a problem with that too.
Right? I mean, okay, so.
Usually, I just make people leave the room and I stay there.
Right? I don't know how to make you leave the room. I don't know if you can leave the room. You can stay. You can stay here while we tell you about things.
Let's see.
Maybe we'll figure it out.
It really is. Yeah. It's like
okay. No.
It's like the controls on a
real spaceship.
Space
Capsule. I mean.
Well, and it is very similar because the astronauts don't really drive them and get to control anything.
Oh, there we go. Left the room. He left the.
Goodbye, Bubba
right.
Droll.
Shall we
Thanks for joining us.
Go through
Yeah. So the space race kicks off, right? Rocket research continued post World War II, but mostly for weapons. But then out of nowhere,
dun dun dun,
the Soviets launch a satellite.
Sputnik 1. The first human-made object to orbit the Earth was launched by the USSR. It remained in space until January 4th, 1958, and it was launched on October 4th, 1957.
Yeah.
And then Sputnik 2, carrying a dog, was launched by the USSR. And it...
Just a month later.
Yeah, it remained in orbit.
And who was the dog? The dog was Laika.
Laika.
Yeah.
Oh, a girl? It was a girl dog?
Astro dog.
She a girl dog?
I don't know.
She a bitch?
I actually don't know.
We don't know. It was in Russian.
If anybody ever goes to the Museum of Ancient Technologies,
they have her skeleton.
They have a whole gallery of paintings of all the Soviet dogs because there were like a dozen of them, like different dogs that went into space. Anyway,
yeah.
Sorry. Museum of Ancient Technology in Los Angeles.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Okay, so
the U.S. launches a satellite. January
31st, 1958, Explorer 1, the first U.S. satellite in orbit, was launched into space.
I know I always am a stickler on the dates, but there's too many dates here. So.
Oh, you don't want me to read? Oh, you don't want me to read the dates? Last time he was like, I need dates. Now he's like, I don't like dates.
So anyway, there's a whole bunch of satellites going back and forth through the late 50s, right?
Yeah. Wait, when.
Let's just jump to the next major thing.
Yeah, you don't like dates. You like fake Newtons, but Isaac Newton.
Oh, I get it.
Get it? Oh, okay. We have jokes. All right. So then there's it's back and forth. That's basically the space race.
So through the 50s and early 60s. No, then in so there's all these satellites going up, and then in 63, the Russians put a man into orbit.
They did. They put a man, and then they put a woman.
Yeah.
Then they put a woman, and the U.S. was like, oh my God, we're so envious.
The man was Yuri Gagarin.
And he was...
And actually, it's in I think it's April 12th or something. In early April, there's a worldwide celebration of Yuri's Day, where everybody celebrates the first man in space. In part because Yuri was really, like, he's like a great story of like a kid born in a small town like 100 miles outside Moscow who was obsessed with flying and wanted to be a pilot his whole life. And then kind of like local boy makes good, he became the first cosmonaut. And then he became an international hero and traveled even like to the U.S., even though this was at the height of the Cold War, and around the world. Fun fact about Yuri Gagarin, he was only 5'2".
Oh, he was a short boy.
Yeah, it almost disqualified him from becoming a pilot. But
he
then
said no.
They're pretty sure that's the reason he was chosen is because he could fit into the Soyuz capsule.
Because they're like, you're going to die anyway. It's fine.
A lot of the test pilots were dying from experimental flights anyway.
They were just dying. But in the U.S., people, like, they didn't know about that. And they were like, woo, America, Space Mountain.
So they're not sure because the records still haven't all been declassified. But they think they called them the lost cosmonauts. They think there were, like, even,
many.
Like, from the... So, yeah, so Yuri Gagarin... first man in orbit. Alan Shepard was the first American orbit just 3 months later.
I love how they're like, let's just circle the Earth like a little bit. Let's just like...
Well, Yuri was in his flight was 108 minutes, so almost 2 hours, and he did like go all the way around the world, and then landed in the ocean or whatever and like survived. Although he parachuted out of the capsule 8 miles up and landed. And so it technically does not count as a full space flight if you don't land.
Dareth, how dare?
Yeah, so he did not complete an actual space flight.
So in America, like Americans were like, "Woo, space race!" But then like the Cold War started to kind of like die out a little bit, and they're like, "We're not as scared as we were of the Russians." A little bit.
Yet. You're jumping ahead. That wasn't until like post moon landing.
It was right before the moon landing because...
Johnson was all about it, though. He was like,
yes, that's why I'm mentioning it. That's why I'm mentioning it, because there was Kennedy, right? And then, like, right around, and Kennedy was like, I'm gonna fight the Republicans because they don't care about space. And they don't care about nuclear weapons. So there was him, and people were like, "Oh, he hot, he's sexy. Like, we on board with his spacecraft." At the time, there was like a space thing that was published. It was a spacecraft that was publicized. It was like on TV, and it like exploded before it took off. And people saw that, and they were like, "Ooh, people might be dying. Like, we thought it was all cute and shiny, but people might be dying." And then they were like, "And Kennedy's dead, and he was the hot one." And they were like, "We're not quite as scared of the Russians, and we don't know if we really care so much." But yeah, Johnson was like, he was like, I am in this to win this. We have to do something better than those damn Russians.
Well, it's both for national unity, but I disagree. I don't think the space race was winding down. I think it was still going.
It was what I'm saying is the American everyman
in particular
didn't care as much
because of the Cold War. The whole idea of like space dominance was like the U.S. was terrified of the Russians having satellites that would orbit America and be able to drop nukes on us. So it was very much a threat throughout the Cold War.
But like at this point, they were just a little bit less scared, and so they were like we've been fighting wars, like we're a little bit. They're like a little bit less. But yeah, Johnson was like, it's not about the spies and the he was like, we just have to do it because we're in it so deep. And then we really pulled ahead because we were kind of losing. The U.S. was kind of losing the space race. Then we got our man on the moon.
Well, yeah, the U.S. definitely wanted a man on the moon. The U.S. they didn't know it at the time because didn't get good information or intelligence about what the Soviets were up to. But Soviet engineering was terrible still, and like despite these like the occasional like putting a person in orbit, the Soviets were like way behind, and so there actually was prior to the moon landing, which was in '69. In '67, there's this very sad story of a Russian Dmitry Karamov who went up in this like very faulty capsule because Leonid Brezhnev, the Soviet premier, really wanted to demonstrate something on the 10-year anniversary of Sputnik. And so he was supposed to go up in a capsule, and then they would transfer him to another capsule, and they'd show that they could do a transit between two spacecraft that were in orbit. And instead, he knew that it was like a faulty design and that there were like major problems with the Soyuz craft that he was supposed to go up in. And then, he got up into orbit, and then the parachutes didn't work, and he died. And like while on the radio, just cursing the engineers who had built this like piece of crap spacecraft.
That's so Russian. He was like,
Well, and then supposedly people kind of asked him, because Yuri Gagarin then like was no longer going into space because he was too valuable, but had a lot of political power, and so Yuri Gagarin wrote a letter to Brezhnev to try to convince him like to call it off and like,
don't go, bro, don't go, I love you.
And all of the Soviet bureaucrats were too afraid to deliver the letter, so nobody delivered the letter, and like
sounds a lot like what happened with Galileo a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a sad story, and it like.
You gotta get 2 copies of the letter. You gotta bring yourself.
Well, then Karmarov even apparently was asked. Yuri, I think, asked him, was still, I guess, the backup or something. For some reason, like Yuri Gagarin would have been the cosmonaut who went if Karmarov didn't go on that.
I think they were in love. I think that's what happened.
It's a very sad story. So anyway, then in '69, the moon landing happens. Prior to the moon landing, though, the U.S. announces the Apollo program because Johnson wants to reinvigorate the space race.
Because there was like other ones, like there was like Gemini, the best one.
What was the Gemini program?
I don't know. I'm a Gemini though, so it was like obviously the best
your
one.
Own program. The Apollo program was for the moon landing though.
There was also Venus, I think, and
Yeah. So the Apollo 7 were 7 experimental test pilots who were chosen. Johnson insisted on having pilots, even though the pilots on spacecraft don't fly them. It's all automated or controlled from the ground. And so NASA was like, we could have technicians who know how to fix the thing. Like they could go up, and Johnson was like, no, I want fighter pilots.
I want pilots on my plane, space plane.
Yeah, if you go watch The Right Stuff, a lot of what it delves into, it's about the Apollo 7, but really more about sort of the character and kind of insanity of like being an experimental test pilot in the 60s, because they had I think their total survival rate for like a career as a test pilot is like 50%.
They'd be smoking on the spaceship like Don Draper.
Of the bus that takes them to the landing pad, they like turn around and like piss on it because that's what Yuri did.
He had a great name for that too. He urinated.
Yeah.
That's great.
We'll give was not an astronaut, but Chuck Yeager is known as regarded as like the greatest pilot ever, who was an experimental test pilot who was not chosen for the Apollo program. But Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong were, and they walked on the moon.
They did, and they were so cute.
And Stanley Kubrick filmed it in a studio.
Yes, he did, and it was all a lie, and it was real. It was real.
Oh, first American in space, I don't know if we said Alan Shepard, by the way.
Yeah.
And Shepard, unlike Yuri, Shepard did pilot his craft. He landed
Ooh,
it.
burn.
Burn.
Wait, isn't it funny that the Apollo mission is named Apollo, but like Apollo's like the sun, right?
Yeah, right. It should have been Thea is the moon goddess?
Is Thea the moon goddess? Isn't Artemis? It should have been Artemis.
Yeah, it should have been the Artemis
goddess of the hunt.
Yeah.
The moon goddess.
So yeah, that kind of ended the space race, although then the Soviets did create like a space station, and then America joined them after the Cold War ended, and we have the International Space Station.
We do, but it's kind of like shitty now, because like no one cares anymore, and Russia's like, they're like, fine, we'll let it rust or whatever, and America, it's kind of like if you have like a pet with someone and you guys break up and you're like, I don't know.
No one's taking care of the ISS.
You're like, you don't walk him anymore, and they're like, he can walk himself. That's kind of like what our space station is like, and China's like, ha ha ha, we're already in another galaxy. We are now the dominant space race. We don't know what they're doing, but they're doing. It's not It's like they're killing it because they're watching. They're like, they're silly. They're arguing. We're gonna win.
Yeah, it is also worth mentioning. Buttered Roll made the point. He's like that. Like liquid, like jet propulsion, is still the technology we use to send the spacecraft into orbit, and it mostly is like like liquid oxygen, and you just ignite it, and we use combustion still to send our rockets up. And so lots of scientists proposed, especially post World War II, like it's the nuclear age, right? In the 60s and 70s, making a nuclear powered spaceship basically that would like set off nuclear blasts to like take off. And so like obviously there were problems with fallout and setting off a bunch of nuclear bombs, but the NASA scientists at the time were like, we could figure it out. Like we could sort this, we can solve it, we can like collect the fallout.
Dude, we got it.
And the program was canceled in part because of how unpopular nuclear power was and became in the 70s.
People were like, no. They were like, peace and love.
So I think it was Buckminster Fuller he has a famous quote. He's like, it's the only technology ever that the humanity chose to like not use because of political reasons, which is completely untrue.
Yeah,
there's tons of technologies we don't use because of political reasons.
So like, should we read some of Elon Musk's tweets?
Since we're now at the present day with Elon Musk, future Mars man.
Or current, we don't know. Maybe he's there right now. Maybe he's tweeting from Mars. We don't know.
We might as well call out, though, SpaceX. There is a really brilliant innovation behind SpaceX's whole business model, which is
PayPal.
Lockheed and Boeing used to get all the contracts for doing flights to the space station. And SpaceX, all they really realized is they were like, you guys send these booster rockets up and then just let them fall into the ocean.
They were like,
don't reuse them.
Wouldn't it be cool if you could like send space travel by email? Like PayPal. Get it? Because Elon Musk invented PayPal.
Gives you better writing for this show.
Yeah. I didn't know that he invented PayPal. I'm like, that's so cool. And now he's trying to do it with space.
PayPal.
Space Pal.
SpaceX recovers their rocket boosters. That's their like the big innovation, and it turns out that saves you insane amounts of money rather than just dropping them into the ocean.
Oh yeah, that is really cool. And then
it'd be like if every
Tesla.
time you drove your car somewhere, you blew up the car like once you got out of it.
That's
right?
what he says about like people who don't drive Teslas. He's like, you're basically blowing your car up every time you take it somewhere.
Yeah. So cool idea for a business model. They're doing well, and now everybody's developing reusable rocket boosters.
Let's read some tweets of his because they're great.
Yeah.
So
here's why having just that great idea for SpaceX isn't enough to make you a great person. Because if you're really active on the internet, you also can sound like a dumbass all the time.
Yeah, I think he sounds pretty smart though.
All right, let's
we'll go back and forth. Ready?
Yeah.
So flamethrowers for, and this is in quotations, zombie apocalypse.
Okay.
So that's one.
He did design and sell a flamethrower, by the way.
Well, then his next tweet is, the rumor that I'm secretly creating a zombie apocalypse to generate demand for flamethrowers is completely false.
Nice. He's such a nerd, man. Oh, so he posted, why is there no Flat Mars Society? And the Flat Earth Society responded.
They added him. They added our boy.
Hi, Elon. Thanks for the question. Unlike the Earth, Mars has been observed to be round. We hope you have a fantastic day.
I like that. They're polite. They're polite, flat dummies. The rumor that I'm building a spaceship to get back to my home planet Mars is totally untrue. I'm like, he doth protest too much. All right. Oh, yeah. So he's replying to himself. There are many chapters of bankruptcy, and as critics so rightly pointed out, Tesla has them all, including chapter 14 and a half, the worst one.
Tesla never actually went bankrupt, but people thought they were going to. Apparently, there is this thing called dad jokes, and I make them.
Oh, cute. He's a dad.
That is pretty cute.
If this works, I'm treating myself to a volcano lair. It's time.
I don't know why anybody asked him this. At Elon Musk, any love for ceilings? They tend to look down on floors. And Elon's response is, a ceiling is simply a floor from below.
Which I love. That's, that's how he feels about space.
Wish they would delete Twitter.
A little red wine, a vintage record, some Ambien, and magic.
He does. Yeah, he has a Rick and Morty post on there. Of course, he loves Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Well, someone was like, "Do you like Rick and Morty?" And he said, "It's kind of disgusting, but I do like. Me and my kids like it." Which. Yeah.
My kids. He has one kid.
Yep, that's another weird thing he said on Twitter.
He's like, one? All right.
My kids.
He just posted, "I love Twitter." Ugh. This is a funny one. Somebody is asking about the SpaceX landings where they land the rocket boosters. Is there any reason that most of the landings appear to have been at night so far? His response is, "It's much easier to do the CGI that way."
Oh, yeah, this is like, I think we should end. So, Insane Clown Posse added him, and they were like, "Yo, at Elon Musk. Thank you, Ninja, but how about showing our wounded pockets how much you like them somehow? They've been wounded since our battle with the FBI. We are open to anything you come up with, my wealthy and powerful friend." Elon Musk just goes, "I will buy tons of your merch."
Yes.
Which, yeah. Oh, I guess, okay, here's the real last one.
I don't get it. His name is Gary and he's a snail?
Yep, we'll never know.
I think that's a SpongeBob quote.
Oh, maybe. Maybe he's a big Gary fan.
Yeah, I don't know. So,
yeah. Stay off Twitter. But definitely on Saturday, definitely 100% for real.
There is a funny part, by the way, tied into our upcoming DJ night and Elon Musk, is that he wrote an EDM song. And he, like, much like me, he is capable of producing them in just a few hours.
Which, so yeah, Wires is going to be dropping a new, maybe EDM song with Stephen Hawking, maybe not. Mm-hmm. You'll have to tune in to find out.
So tune in, you can hear it.
Yeah.
This Saturday night at 9 p.m.
Saturday, 9, EST, Eastern Standard Time, space time, on twitch.tv/secret law.
That's a good question. What time zone do they use in space?
Dun, dun, dun. Oh, yeah. And then we'll be back next week talking about ballet, I think. Methinks we're going to be talking about ballet. Also, if you're listening to this on iTunes, do the things. Just rate it and give it 5 stars. And if you don't have 5 stars in your heart for us, then we don't want any of your stars.
But don't rate it 0 stars.
Don't. We don't want any. We just five or goodbye.
Yeah.
5 or goodbye.
Yeah, you could use that time to go listen to a different podcast.
Yep. There's
All right.
lots of them.
We'll play ourselves out.
Okay, let's do it.
I love that air horn.
Is this the song that Musk wrote?
This is better than anything he could write.
Love you.